Hey, good afternoon in Europe, a good morning in the US, good evening or late afternoon somewhere else on the world. Welcome to the fourth webinar in our series, the Development 101 series. Today we have another speaker, Rob Sanchez. We're very pleased to have them. Let's say somewhat younger than typically I am, or Mark Brummel, or David Singleton, or whatever, whoever I should say. It's great to have another sound here. Rob came into the NAV world actually as a SQL Server administrator, and has been more or less teaching himself on how to develop NAV. And I didn't know when he offered himself to be one of the presenters, but he told me actually the book of David brought him into NAV development. So maybe he's even a better example or a better speaker on the topic than any of us is, having used that book. So we get on pages today. And yes, the word will be to Rob, but before we do, let's go through a couple of slides. The housekeeping rules here. Sorry that I switched, but I'll push the wrong button. As you know, just to rephrase this, any recording or any session is recorded, and you will be able to reference them on Mark's YouTube channel. The link is here, and please do feel free and share it with others, of course. Any upcoming webinars for the series, they're on the website. The link is here, and we're planning a couple of others too, although these are not set yet. If you have questions, use the question window. Today, Rob has said, well, let's go through my story first and keep your questions till the end. Of course, feel free to feed them in the window. Some of the questions that might be obvious or maybe out of scope, I will pick up and answer by typing the answer to you. The rest, let's say I will post them to Rob in a little over 40 minutes time after he has told his story, but don't hold back. I mean, it would be a pity if you had a question and it jumps your mind and you don't know anymore once there's room for question and answers. So use it. A big thanks to Joe Mattis, once again with us on this session, or like any of the other webinars recently. He's helping us out directly. He's taking care of the recording, and Joe is one of the people of Liberty Grove who's hosting us with the GoToWebinar facilities. Thank you very much once again. For the next sessions, number 5, David Singleton will be picking up on fields. You could say where he left on the previous session 4 weeks ago. After that, we have session 6. We're still, let's say, looking for a presenter. I've contacted some people already, so we might have somebody there. And on July 17th, Dave will pick up on queries, and then probably we have a shortcut for the summer season, and then pick it up in August or September on the next topics, and then we will start diving into the CAL part, so let's say more or less the real programming part. Today, yes, Rob, the floor will be yours. I'm going to hand over and change presenter here. So Rob, if you're going to pick up to be able to share your screen, and it's yours. Good luck and enjoy it.
Hey, definitely. Thanks for the intro there, Luke. Hey, everyone. Like Luke mentioned, I came into the NAV world through SQL Server. I also came into the NAV world through heaps of documentation and textbooks. And one of those books has definitely been the Programming NAV 5th edition that we're going through here. So when I saw the webinar opportunity, it was definitely something I wanted to be a part of. There's something to be said for reading the manual, as always, and with NAV, I found that really getting down into the documentation was the best way for me to even begin to understand what was possible and what could be done within NAV. As was mentioned here, we're going to be talking about pages today. And pages are NAV's object type for basically interactively presenting info. So pages are going to display the fields that David is in the middle of speaking about with the other lectures, and they'll display those fields to our users and let folks interact with the database. The page rendering routines that NAV uses allow the pages to display in diverse ways. So we've got our RTC client that we'll use for the demo today, but we've also got web client possibilities, and then opening the client on phones and tablets and all that jazz as well. So we'll come back to the RTC here in a second. Real quick, we'll look at a page under the hood before circling back around to this. But what a page also is to the developers or to the folks on the other side is a group of controls. So we've got containers, groups, fields, and parts. I don't know if, oh, there are some parts on this one. And this will all hopefully make sense when we conclude our session here today. So we'll see how that goes. But let's just look at some pages themselves first to kind of talk about what comprises a page and what are some different types of pages. When it comes to page design and that kind of thing, it's wise to be guided by your environment and kind of look at the system that you're working on and make pages that have a similar look and feel. Where the customization really comes is going to be in deciding what goes in which areas. And before you can decide that, you kind of need to know what some of these areas are. So let me just take you across here, the RTC, and show you, we're looking at a list page, and going across the top here, we've got our basic travel buttons, title bar, the address bar we can navigate from. I think we covered that in the first session. We've got our search bar, our global command bar up here at the top. Something applicable to pages is going to be from the drop down. We can go to help and about this page, where we can see that customer list is indeed a list page, and we can find information about the fields and all sorts of other development goodies. Continuing on our journey down the page here, we've got our navigation pane on the left. This pane will allow you to navigate and move through the app. We've got our filters here to filter this list page, and then our content pane or our results. And then I think there's two more we haven't talked about here. We've got our fact boxes on the right-hand side. And then on the very bottom here, we've got our super informative status bar. So as I mentioned here, there are many different types of pages. NAV and Microsoft always wants to keep things interesting for us. The first type of page that we'll look at here is just the role center page. This is the poster boy or the splash screen, right, of NAV. You have your users log in and have their customized activities section here with the queues and different different pools of tasks and functional items to be done throughout the day. The role center page is a unique one. There aren't a lot of pages that are going to act like that. There are several more common pages, and let's go back to our customer list for that. The list page is going to be the most common. List pages are going to open up with one line per record down here, often with filters for users to choose what they'd want to view. The fact boxes can be edited. The lines here actually, normally they cannot be edited by default, so you'd have to double click them. And a double click will either open our next type of page that we're going to talk about here, or in some instances it'll open a second list page that you can edit from. But then you can make your edits from here, and we click OK to have that pass back through. This type of page we can see if we go to our About page, is a card. And the customer card here, page 21, is a really good example of that. And most card pages in your database are going to be like single records. They're a more complex type of card or type of page than the list page, in that they can have a whole ton of these fast tabs here, full of fields and good information with flow field capabilities as well. And then on the right, they can have all sorts of fact boxes. I don't know that there's a limit. But the card pages and the list pages are used kind of in tandem. So when you're working with a list, odds are you're going to be when you're going to the singular level, you'll be looking at a customer card. The next type of page that is very popular and used within all areas of the application would be a sales order. So I typed in sales orders here in the search, and it took us to the sales order list page, because again, we're getting one record for each sales order. And then we'll double click on one to edit it. And rather than opening a card page, this is our document page. And it is a document because it has the general fast tab at the top and the line items here at the bottom. So this will be for things like invoices and all that kind of thing. I mentioned the word fast tab a few times. I'm not just creating things. The fast tabs are these little gray collapsible boxes. And there are field properties that allow you to promote fields to be displayed up here within these tabs for functionality within the app, so that you can see, see some quick details without having the full fast tab expanded. So we've talked about list page, and then actually this little piece here within the page is called a list part page. But that is not enough. As always, we got to stay on our toes as NAV developers, and they've also made a list plus page, which I think I have. Let me double check here. Oh, that is a document. So the list plus page is going to be a good example would be page 113. And we'll open that up a different route here that I can from the object designer. Within the NAV development environment, we'll go to our page designer here, and then to the filter box at the top to open the ID filter, where I will just look for 113 to show you guys an example of a list plus page, the budget. And I use this run button down here at the bottom. In previous versions, that's been preview, or it could even be preview in other sections, but that's the button you want to run pages and tables from the dev environment to see how things are looking. So I just ran the page and it started a whole client up to spin the page up for me. We can see here, this is a list plus page. The big difference between this and a document page is just that it can have multiple list parts and multiple fact boxes within it. And that can provide some more complex functionality and features. So it's not really going to be a static document in a list plus page. The next type of page we can talk about here is going to be the worksheet journal pages. Now, these are super common within the app, and anywhere that data is entered, so all the journals for GL and that kind of thing are worksheet journal pages, and they can have fact boxes on the right hand side, but their main shtick is, of course, the data entry in the main area here in the center, so users can add new things and stuff to the database and make all the changes that they desire. To take a look at the next type here, we've got this pop-up box here, which happens to be a confirmation dialog page. So the confirmation dialog pages are designed for users to control the flow of the application. So we can, we're just being asked if it's okay, and it's those kinds of messages that are the confirmation dialog pages, and can come up within different features and actions to allow your user to shape kind of what happens or what code is fired. And a very similar page to that are our standard dialog pages. We'll look at 476. The standard dialog page is real close to a confirmation dialog, but it actually allows your user to enter information in as well and do some data entry, which is kind of its main appeal, or why you would want a standard dialog versus a confirmation dialog page. One of the last types of pages to talk about will be the navigate pages. So navigate pages are used within wizards, so like doing email setup and that kind of thing. They provide just like assisted functionality, and like let users and even devs know what possibilities are. And I tend to use wizards and GUIs when I can. I know some people like to go manual with things and stuff, but a lot of users will go the GUI route, so navigate functions are definitely a thing. It's becoming a theme in the conversation, I think, with Microsoft keeping us interested and making sure that we're not bored here, because as far as navigate functionality, it's implemented via worksheet pages. So in NAV 2017, but before that there were actually navigate page types. So they're kind of narrowing that down, or kind of lumping some pages in. Page 344 is a decent example of that here. And the navigate page will allow you to look at a document number and find all the related posted entries. So you can view the summary and number of posted entries and then drill down into those as well. We can just look at a quick example here for a posted invoice. After you add your document, you got to click find here in the top, and we can see, so for that invoice, we've got 2 GL entries and a customer ledger entry. If you wanted to see something there on that, going into some details on the navigate page here, you can show related entries and just pull up the customer ledger entries. This is really handy for devs to troubleshoot or just figure out how something is working within the application. A lot of NAV is centered around patterns and reuses a lot of bits and pieces, so you can jump in here to see what's being affected. And then also there's probably the real purpose why this exists is auditing that can be done through all this route. The final two, or I guess two, I think we've got a request page, which is just associated with reports and XML ports. So when you run a report within NAV, a little page comes up first asking you to enter some filters or data and all that kind of thing. There it is. And this guy is our request page. This is controlled and created through report creation within the dev environment and that kind of thing. So we'll get to that in the future lectures. And after request page, we've got our departments page. Departments, like the role center page, is a little bit odd. It's automatically generated, so all of these are created by our menu suite entries and the menu suite objects on the left-hand side here. All that we can really control on this piece is would be like whether or not we want to show like order processing and planning under purchasing. We can't really control like look and feel and that kind of thing. In a way, your departments page is kind of your map of the system and can be used as that kind of mall kiosk showing you where you're at and where you could go. So in a nutshell, that was all of the page types. There's kind of a lot, but once you start seeing how they're used within the app, it makes sense. And honestly, while you're developing and moving through the app, you don't you don't really need to be consciously thinking, okay, I'm in a worksheet journal page, okay, I'm in a list page. It's just for when you're creating new pages, so you know what to do or what to use, and when you're editing or customizing, you might need to know some different things about how the pages behave. So the one thing that I've just been kind of scrolling past here a good deal and talking about are fact boxes on the right-hand side of the page here. These fact boxes can contain page parts that I've also been mentioning here with the list parts, and there are system parts and chart parts as well. If we didn't have enough jargon, NAV just keeps it coming. The system parts are a way to actually incorporate like Outlook or OneNote. Some third parties software has system parts that you can get into the fact boxes that can add to the functionality. And the chart parts or charting, I guess, can be done with chart parts or with a chart control add-in. In 2009, chart parts were added, and those are actually selected from a table here. So they're predefined. I count my zeros. They're predefined charts. I didn't have enough. And those are selected off this table. And basically those are inserted in the fact box and provide some visual capability and ways to view the data for your users. And then in 2013, Microsoft added chart control add-ins, which are ways to add more customized charts via .NET to have charting capability. And we can look at one of those real quick here. Oh, gotta love the dev environment. Let's jump back to our pages, and we want to look at 9006. I think we had a chart part up behind here anyways, but there we go. I guess. Yeah, so the chart part is this section here on the right-hand side. So more customization on that, and that's the ladder functionality. Both pieces work for charting within NAV, so it's what you're comfortable with at this point. I tend to try to look at just what was released most recently, so hopefully I'm not trying to relearn things, but it's kind of a pick your poison when it comes to charting, I suppose. Just want to touch real quick on naming pages again. I know we just talked about being sort of guided by your environment. You don't want to go and create some wild sort of page type or interesting looking page. NAV isn't really the area to practice your developmental creativity. In some ways it can be with business logic and processing and stuff like that, but for design it's pretty cut and paste. You want it to be standard, and you want to kind of follow along with what your environment is offering you. When it comes to page naming conventions, there's kind of some standards within the like what's singular and what's plural. So we have our customer ledger entries, and the entries page is based on the entry table. So there's a plural page based on a singular table. And then card pages, though, so like the customer card here is a singular name. But probably just the most important thing to keep in mind is that you want to name your pages in like a very useful way, and that everyone knows kind of just from a face value what the heck's going on there, so they don't have to do any drill down and look into it any deeper to troubleshoot or to pick up where someone may have left off. We have been using the object designer throughout this process here, and specifically within the object designer, we've been using the pages here. When we go to design, we get into our page designer. I think that's opening. Sometimes you have to click it actually, I guess. So we've got our page designer here, and this is kind of the under the hood look at a page. So we've seen all those custom or all those user-facing sites of what a page can be and how it looks. And this is how it is to a dev and how it's organized in the background. So it's a hierarchy of controls, essentially. You can look at the types here on the left-hand side. We've got container, group, field, and part is down here at the bottom, our page parts. Some of these words I feel like I've said so many times, part and page, but they're everywhere and they're in different forms. You slowly get used to it. But along with the type, we've got our subtype over here in the right. And this is kind of where we really get into like the finer bits of pages and get into kind of controlling how they look and how they behave for users and adding some customization and all that kind of thing. We can create new pages here from the page designer with the new button. Then it allows us to select a table. You don't have to always select a table. In fact, if you don't, it's an unbound table. But it's wise to always select one because mostly you're going to be making a page to represent or show some fields on a table. A good example of an unbound table is like the role center page or the role center table. I think that one is unbound. But almost everything else within the basic system is going to be bound to something. So let's look in here and just create something for us to look at. Grab the customer ledger entry table. And you can create the page blank where we would add all of those containers that we saw on the left-hand side, or we can select the page type from our list here where we see hopefully all the page types that now make more sense to everyone, at least than they did. We'll start with a card. We'll just make a card page here. It's not that important here. And we'll say OK. It'll ask us if we want any fast tabs on the card page. We just have a general one, and we'll just leave it at that and say OK. When it asks us about fields now, it's going to display all the fields from the associated table we selected, so the customer ledger entry table. And from here we can, let's say we want entry number and posting date on this, and maybe like amount, but we don't really want customer information. We can click on next, and then now it's going to ask us about the fact boxes, which are those panes on the right hand side. Now there's several pre-made parts here. So we've got our card and list parts, our system parts, which are things like Outlook and OneNote, that kind of stuff. And then our chart parts. These are the charts from that table. So in general, you want to, if you can, you would want to create your fact boxes or the parts that you'd want in your page before you create your page, so that you could select them within this phase of creation and take advantage of the functionality of the wizard and kind of cut out some of that human error possibility. We're all perfect, but every once in a while there's a comma or something, and you never know. So the GUIs really help with that kind of thing. But let's say in this case we don't have our list part made or our card part made that we want, but we know it's going to look or behave something like one of these other parts. We can just add that over to the side as well and click finish. This page isn't saved yet, but it gives us something to work on here as far as the control types on the left-hand side. So the container controls are the top of the hierarchy. If we close these down, it's a little bit easier to think of this in a nested, so like a hierarchical structure, right? So the container controls are going to be things like fact box areas or role center areas, like whole sections of the page, like the activities area, are going to be a container. And now is a good time to introduce you guys to Shift F4, which is not delete line. I don't know what's happening with my hotkeys, so I'll show you a good way to view the properties from here. You can go to View and Properties. If you're not remote desktoped in a few levels, you can hit Shift F4 to open that up, and it's pretty convenient. Coming into nav development, there are a lot of windows and a lot of boxes, fields and things, and it's a good idea to at least be aware of when there is a hotkey available or a hotkey possibility, because it'll help you speed along and open things up quickly. Also, another little nav dev tip is when you open your properties window, you can set it out to the side here and navigate through your page designer and actually see the properties, change each time and not have to keep opening up your properties or edit the windows. You have your freedom with making this a manageable tool. But the container controls are kind of get us to inheritance. While nav isn't object oriented, it's object based, and data validation is inherited. So basically, if properties are defined on tables and things like that explicitly, they can't be defined or used like less restrictively anywhere else along the way. But so beneath our containers here, we'll have our group controls, and the group control properties feed down and are inherited by everything within them. So within their group, all of the fields. As far as group control properties, there's several over here that are worthwhile. Definitely captions are always important, and then like enabled, invisible, stuff like that will control like whole swaths of the page. So if you're working on something, maybe you would leave it disabled or cleared up. We can continue down to see we've got field controls as well, which we've begun talking about fields in the prior lectures, and I'm sure it looks like we're diving into it deeper still. But we can set up fields and control all their properties here from the right. The properties here that apply to certain data types within the field only apply when that data type is on the field. There's just a lot of information and a lot of options because Microsoft and nav is a world of options and possibilities. So getting to the that kind of gets to the under the hood look of what a page consists of. If we were going to be creating one manually, or if we created a blank page, we would have just a container, and then we could add groups or more containers and fields to those groups to really customize and show what we would want. So like this card page, let's preview it here. Since I just kind of mocked one up, I don't know really if it's, oh, there we go. So we can hit preview here, and since these are the only fields I selected, and I only wanted a general fast tab, that's what that's what we've got there, and we've got our fact box here, our sales quote subform. So you can kind of get an idea for how the page is cobbled together, and when you're actually working on development, you can click on it and see as you go. There's one kind of final piece of pages that folks should be at least aware of, I suppose. And I guess first we'll look at, I don't think I touched on the triggers yet on the new page we created. There are 13 default triggers on the page. So this looks a little messy right now because we've got code on the customer card, but the triggers run cal code when certain events happen. So on after get record, we're going to run this bit of code. In general, when you are going to add pages to or code to page triggers, you want to kind of put on the brakes and first see if you can add that code to a library code unit, and then call that library code unit from a field or a table instead. And that's just to keep things more streamlined and to make upgrading and troubleshooting easier on devs and on yourself down the road. When it comes to calling code units, there's also events. In page objects, we'll create those events that can be subscribed to, but that's probably another lecture down the road for us to talk about here. The last thing that I was getting to before I remembered triggers was page actions. And we can get to page actions from Control-Alt F4 normally, but you can go to View Page Actions as well. And you can see the Page Action Designer is very similar to our Page Designer in that it's got page action control types with their subtypes. And we've got, you know, action container, action group with action instead of field. And again, we can see their we can see the properties on the right-hand side. And these actions are associated with the like the buttons in the ribbon on the top. So if you were to add a new action, you would also add some code for the action to have the button call one of those library code units that we mentioned, maybe, or call start a business process. You'll commonly find like imports and things like that done through actions. I think that is about the end of the kind of high-level overview of the different types of pages and what a page looks like from the RTC side and under the hood. Also kind of just how to navigate around and look at pages. You really want to feel comfortable with using the About here in the RTC client and finding info for yourself and for whomever else you need it for. And then also getting into the NAV page designer and the action designer, and not being intimidated by these lists of indented and bulleted info, and diving in. One of the fastest way is to either just troubleshoot an issue deeply and read all the things you can while you're working on it, or to create a page yourself, like the WDTU application kind of walks you through in the book. You always want to, again, like I've mentioned a few times, just stay within the kind of environmental guidelines as far as your creativity within NAV. But there's a ton of add-ins and things that can be done within those design guidelines. And I hope you guys have found this useful. I think that kind of rounds out my part and can open up the floor for some questions and answers if there are any.
I've got one question, Rob, and thanks for the comprehensive explanation. I've got a question from Kurt, well, actually a suggestion on how to open the properties of the page. So if you're on a line on a control, it's clear that you can, as you showed, to open the property sheet. How do you find the properties of the page itself?
So to find the properties of the page, we'll actually come all the way down. We'll have to come to an empty line. And if you see our properties box over here, when we clicked onto that empty line, the page properties actually came up. And that's a great question. Those properties are going to be the top of your hierarchy, the actual top, rather than your container group and group. So yeah, you'd have to come down to a bottom line to view that.
Okay, I've got a question from Rajesh, if I pronounce it right. Is there any possibility to display few fields by default in the filters in the list page? For instance, in customer list, the user needs to have country and posting group field displayed in the filter conditions to be there by default. Is that possible to be done?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question correctly, we can edit the customer list page, and that's one of the good things about pages in general, is that they're designed for that kind of user customization with that user experience in mind. Let's just look at the customers list real quick. So to add filters here is probably the question, and yes, we can add user personalization to keep those filters and to change the columns as well of what they see on the list page.
Yeah, but as a designer, as a developer, you don't have the possibilities to set that up.
Right, it would have to be on the user side of the fence.
Yeah, and one of the darn things, I don't know your thoughts on that, Rob, but if you take the drop down, for example, on that name field, which you have now in your filter. So if you want to select another field, you get this subsection of fields which are on the list, but if you want to find more, you can select the all. Then yeah, you have a very big list, and there's nothing to be done that you could filter that down and make the selection smaller or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another question from Pedro. And I hope, Rajesh, that your question is answered well enough. Pedro's question, is there a property to mark mandatory fields? Is it really mandatory or just an help asterisk or reminder?
So yeah, that field properties, we can, there is a property that will make it required. Let me jump into a page real quick. So show mandatory down here is a field property that'll control the tabbing of the user and the functionality of the user. And I believe, Luke, have to correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we're gonna make fields mandatory on the on a new card.
Yeah, so it will show, as Pedro also pointed out, an asterisk, and yes, it shows you a red asterisk, but it's just you could say a kind of display only thing. It's not making it mandatory. It's not forcing the user to have to fill in values. That's one of the challenges always in NAV. There is no, in general, no possibility to make things to force the user to enter data by using properties.
Dialog pages or other customizations to force that logic.
Yeah, true. You have to write code to do that. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Pedro, you're welcome. I had a question, and while now reading out loud the questions of others, my mind started to get blank on that. Oh, it's gone. Okay, there's somebody else coming around. Thank you for saving me, and I hope I get my mind on that, and otherwise I'll get later. Umar has put something down, and let me read out loud. I haven't read it yet. What could cause the error? Record already exists on a document page, and what is the best solution?
So it sounds like maybe if you're just going to create a new one, then this number sequence could be off, and that it could be actually trying to create a document of of one that does already exist. As far as troubleshooting, like Luke mentioned, I'm a SQL Server guy. I tend to go to SQL Server very early, maybe too early in the troubleshooting, but I would just look there and see, does this record exist? Or run the NAV debugger on that option to see if anything else pops up that might be worth checking out.
Yeah, from a NAV developer perspective, I guess I'm more on that side than you, Rob. I would start up the debugger and at least see if you get that error. And there is no golden bullet on this. It could depend on the circumstances why you get that error, Umar. But thanks, you saved me, because now I found out what I wanted to ask Rob. If you're, for example, on this, you have this in design mode, page 1, the company information, back of the underneath the object designer. If I'm going to build a page like that, and I need to put on quite a substantial number of fields, how do I do that? Am I going to fill them in, put them on the screen one by one, or do I have another option?
So if you're going to build a new page and you want to use a similar page or use all the fields from one, you can create a copy.
Yeah, or just create a new one.
Create a new page and duplicate the fields over.
Yeah, but if, for example, if you select new and then select a table, whatever item, I don't care. Yeah.
That's going to be a short one.
Currency, yeah, and you create a card. Yeah, that's great. and if you can make groups or whatever, but if I would like to put a number of fields on this one, what do you typically do?
I've been using the GUI wizard to add the fields, or start adding fields down here one by one from group to field.
That's a good one, using that wizard. If you do it from scratch here, did you ever use, if you go to view and then the field menu?
And then select just in bulk everything you'd like to add.
Yeah, just select a number of lines and then click on the page. You don't need to do anything else. Click on the page and it will ask you this question. And here you can drop them in this way. Yeah?
The speed and alacrity with which you nav develop.
But it's fun. It's fun to see different ways in that sense. And yes,
it definitely is.
Using the wizard is a great one, of course. But for example, if you have a page already and you've created new fields, you want to add them to an existing page, you cannot run the wizard again. So
true.
So
back to Umar's question though. I was thinking he might be talking about the auto split key on the document lines. Can you explain that a little bit?
On the
if you look at the sales lines page 46. And if you go down to the first blank line, you can see the auto split keys is there. And that, if you don't have that set, when you try to insert a new line into a document, it'll give you that error message that he was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the auto split key, what that does for you is if your key has an integer as the last one, it'll increment the integer and then you don't get the duplicate. And if you're trying to make a subform with that, you'll get that. And then it looks like he responded back and he says it's a problem with the doc number field not updating, linking to the number series. So yes, also having the number series set so that you get a new number would prevent that same error message, Umar.
By the way, on this auto split key, giving training, often people build a main page and a sub form, as they called it previously, and some objects are still called that way, sub page. So you have a main one like on a document and the lines, like you pointed out, Joe. Be aware that this sub form, this sales order sub form or sub page, what you want to call it, always needs to be a list part page of type list part. Otherwise, auto split key will never work. It doesn't work on any other page. Well, sorry, no, it does. It does work on a worksheet. Sorry, it works on a worksheet and it works on a list part page. Okay, let's see if I get other questions. A question from Carlos. I read out loud. Sometimes people use auto increment on a field property. What is the difference with this auto split key? You want to pick it up, Rob?
Auto increment versus the auto split.
Yeah.
So the auto increment will control your number series and the and how how the new documents are listed.
No. Auto increment is a SQL property, yeah, and it will just fill in. It should be numerical field, and will give it a value. So it's controlled by SQL Server, and if you so it needs to be inserting the record before SQL Server can assign a value to it. While auto split key is on the NAV side. It's done by, let's say, the platform, by CAL. And even if you, let's say, really insert a record, before you reinsert it into SQL, it already populates the field. Could even still buffer the records that are going to be inserted. So it buffers it on the service tier and it assigns already values to it. And next to the fact, but maybe that's a bit too much for now, how to split key is depending on the context you're in. So if you have one document with lines, all the lines will have numbers, but the next document might use the same numbers on the related lines, while auto increment is always one unique number. It's not repeated. Okay. Do we have more questions? Let me see. I don't see more questions on the list. Rob, you're a hero. You're within time.
Hey, we made it.
Big congratulations. And I think you did a great job. If people have still questions, feel free to put them on the screen while I'm talking still. On the other hand, feel free to use our NAV Skills Twitter account or wherever you find one of us to ask your questions. Don't hesitate to ask, and if I speak for myself, I'm always fast in answering, and if not, I will pick it up later.
Definitely, Rob? Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at the NAV Cave, and I can help you out or answer any other questions that you may have as well.
Yeah, great. Anything on your desks or on your virtual desk, Rob, to be mentioned?
No, I think that's it. I'm really happy to be involved with the project, and for those of you just getting started with dev, keep on trucking through the 101 and kind of clearing up the fog of war to glimpse what NAV can really be, and you'll be surprised what you will find.
Yeah, and before we end, and David Singleton is also
we have two more questions.
Okay, but there was also a question from David, which I wanted to repeat once more. Yes, let's say he was asking what is the next session. Yes, it will be on May 22. And David Singleton, yes, it will be your turn. And okay, Umar is putting another one here. Auto split key was set. I think it is a problem from the header part, yes, relating to his issue, so on his document number. So he's going to have a look at the number series. Okay, David, yes, thank you. Okay, I have to make, and thank you very much, I have to make a small change. Yes, because of David's own agenda, we are going to move from the 22nd of May, and thanks for pointing out, David, to the 29th of May. And I forgot to change that on the slide, so put it somewhere in your agenda. The next session will be on the 29th, and I make a note once again here that I'll put it also right on the next newsletter. Yeah, recordings will be available. Often it is done, by the way, by Mark Brummel, and often it's like Joe just pushed the button to stop the recording, and he will have to wait a little bit before the recording is ready. It's post-process, and then Mark will put it on YouTube, and often it's already there this evening, for anybody around the world. Thank you very much, Rob. Once again, you did a great job. Joe, thank you for supporting us, and everybody else, thanks for attending and contributing with your questions. Have a good day, and see you next time, or hear you or talk to you next time. Bye for now.